Muslim political struggle. The East India Company, which came to India for trade purposes, soon overpowered the political system, which resulted in the end of the glorious Muslim rule over India. The subjugated position greatly perturbed the Muslims, who had lost their eminent social position with the end of their political rule. The Muslims were a great nation before the advent of the British. They had come to India as conquerors and settled down to dominate every walk of life. They were administrators, soldiers, traders, peasants, scholars, and artisans. Naturally, the new development did not suit them, and they were not happy over the turn of affairs. The Muslims were keenly looking for an opportunity for their revival to the old position of eminence in society. They waged their struggle under the leadership of their sincere leaders. The Muslims began their revival struggle under Sir Syed Ahmad Shahid Brelvi, which unfortunately failed. They again put up a valiant endeavor to throw off the yoke of slavery in 1857 when the War of Independence was fought against the British. This effort proved a futile exercise, and the Muslims were left in the lurch to face the most cruel and inhuman British rule. The British, with the connivance of the Hindus, took a number of actions to crush the Muslims completely. The respectable social life was denied to the Muslims for their involvement in the War of Independence. Their economic condition was destroyed by adopting a systematic policy of extermination, and consequently the Muslims reached at the lowest ebb of their social life. In this hour of despair and distress, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan came forward to pull the Muslims out of the position of despondency. He advised the Muslims to get modern education first and then embark upon political revival in order to get back their old position in society. Sir Syed launched his Aligarh movement, which showed the Muslims the new horizons of respectable life. The Aligarh movement ably guided the Muslims to recapture their lost glory in the Indian social setup by bringing stability to their social, economic, education, political aspect of life. The British ascended the Indian throne on 1st November 1858, and the direct British rule was imposed on India. The East India Company ceased to exist from the day the British Crown took over the political realm of India. However, the War of Independence had amply manifested the temper and tone of the local people to the new rulers, who had realized that it was no more possible to keep away the local people from the fate of the country. The Legislative Council Acts of 1861. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had indicated in the causes of the Indian revolt several weaknesses of the government in the running of the administration of the country. He advised the British government to include the Indian people in the administration of the country, so that the people's mistrust and fear could be minimized. He advised the government to give representation to the local people in the Legislative Council to create sentiments of loyalty among their subjects. The first ever constitutional structure was formulated in 1861. The British government passed the Legislative Council Act to introduce better provisions for the Governor-General's Council and for local government. According to this act, the Indian people were included in the Governor-General's Council for the first time in the history of India. The number of the members of the Legislative Council was increased. The Governor was given authority to nominate at least 6 persons to his council. The Legislative Council was to make laws. The nominated members, however, were not authorized to criticize the actions of the council and also could not put questions to the members of the councils about the functions of the Legislative Council. The Governor General could issue ordinances and was authorized to veto provincial legislation. The heads of the provinces were to be called as lieutenant governors. The Enforcement of Legislative Council Act of 1861 was the first step taken for the constitutional reforms in India. It provided, in spite of its limited scope, an opportunity to the Indian people to safeguard their political interests. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was nominated as the member of the Legislative Council under the Act of 1861. Indian Councils Act 1892. Indian National Congress was formed in 1885 on the initiative of the retired British civil servant Sir Alan Octavian Hume. The Indian National Congress, which grew in the time to be the most powerful and vocal political organization of India, was originally intended to provide a platform for the safeguard of the interests of the Indian people. It claimed at the time of its establishment that it would strive for the safeguard of the interests of all communities in India, irrespective of their religion or political tendencies. For some time in the beginning, Congress did adhere to its promise and displayed a posture of national organization. But with the time, it turned into a pure Hindu body working for the safeguard of the Hindu interest. The demands which were projected from the Congress platform appeared very innocent and democratic, but actually were aimed at the complete elimination of the Muslims from the Indian society. The Indian National Congress expressed its dissatisfaction over the inadequate representation which the Legislative Council Act of 1861 gave to the Indian people. It demanded more representation for the Indian people in the legislative and administrative bodies of the government. The Congress demanded that the nomination to the central and provincial legislative council should be through general election instead of by nomination. It also demanded the appointment to the government service through competitive examinations. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan vehemently criticized this demand by the Congress and advised the Muslims to keep away from the Congress politics. He said that the system of election on the pattern of the Western democracy could not be introduced in India, as it would impose the Hindu majority rule over the Muslim minority. He therefore advocated the system of nomination introduced in the Act of 1861. He also opposed the appointment to the government service by competitive examinations, which meant the expulsion of the Muslims from government service because the Muslims could not compete with the Hindus who were well advanced in modern education. In 1892, the government introduced another act known as the Indian Council Act of 1892. The salient provisions of this act were as follows. The number of the non-official members in the central and provincial legislative council were increased. However, the official members were still in majority. The members of the legislative council were given the right to put questions. They were also authorized to discuss the annual budget. The local bodies were given the right to send their elected members to the legislative council. The Act of 1892 could not ensure the maximum safeguard of the Muslims. The Muslim leaders now rightly felt for a separate electorate to protect the Muslim interest. Hindi-Urdu controversy. Urdu was nearly 300 years old and considered as the language of the Muslims in the subcontinent from early times. The amalgamation of Arabic, Persian, and Turkish gave birth to a new language which was called Hindustani, Shahjahani, and finally Urdu. It was also called a Lashkari because of the fusion of other languages. Gradually, the new language of Urdu became the media of expression of the Muslims of the subcontinent. They adopted this language for the expression of their social, cultural, and regional feelings. Urdu soon passed through stages of development and became the symbol of Muslim unity and culture. The Muslim and Hindu writers worked a lot for the development of Urdu. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan also rendered valuable services for the development and protection of Urdu. The Muslims therefore developed an emotional attachment with Urdu, which had attained a status of their national language. The Hindus, for their eternal jealousy and hatred toward the Muslims and their culture, did not like the rapid progress of Urdu. Urdu was introduced as an official language of the subcontinent in 1825, which aroused Hindu antagonism against this language. The British too were not in favor of any measures which was to promote Muslim cultural values in the subcontinent. The British ruler, in order to please the Hindus, began to oppose Urdu to eliminate the influence of Muslim culture. The Hindi-Urdu controversy began in the year 1867, when Hindus demonstrated against Urdu and demanded its replacement with Hindi as an official language. Some prominent Hindu leaders organized an agitation against the use of Urdu as an official language and demanded that Hindi, written in Devanagari script, should be introduced in the offices and courts as official language. Sir Syed was extremely disappointed to see the Hindus behaving in a prejudicial manner. He was now convinced that the Hindus would never be friendly with the Muslims. On this occasion, Sir Syed expressed his views about Hindus and Muslims as two separate nations for the first time in 1868. He expressed his views in a painful manner to Mr. Shakespeare, the governor of Benares, and said, "I am convinced now that Hindus and Muslims could never become one nation, as their religion and way of life were quite distinct from each other." In view of Hindu opposition, Sir Syed decided to adopt measures for the protection of Urdu. He demanded from the government in 1887 that a Dar-ul-Tarjuma be established so that the authentic works could be translated into Urdu for the benefit of the university students. The Hindus intensely opposed Sir Syed's activities for the protection of Urdu, but he continued with his efforts to safeguard the language. Sir Syed established Center Association in Allahabad and effectively used the platform of Scientific Society for the protection of Urdu. The Hindus persisted with their anti-Urdu agitation, which gradually spread in other parts of the country. In 1871, George Campbell, the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, ordered that Urdu should be scrapped from the syllabus books. In 19, the UP Governor Anthony MacDonald, who had gained widespread notoriety for his anti-Muslim sentiments, pressurized by the Hindu agitation, issued order that Hindi should be used as official language in public offices, education institutions, and courts. These orders created a sense of shock among the Muslims of India. Nawab Mohsin al-Mulk criticized the government decision, which had no legal or ethical grounds. He established Urdu Defense Society, which held public meetings on several places to protest against the biased decision of Anthony MacDonald. The students of Aligarh College also protested against MacDonald for scrapping Urdu as official language. These protests by the students of Aligarh College in support of Urdu infuriated MacDonald, who threatened the trustees of the Aligarh College to stop the government grant if Nawab Mohsin al-Mulk, the secretary of the college, and the students did not stop their anti-government activities. The threat did not to ease down the Muslims' agitation, as Aligarh College was facing financial problems. However, Nawab Mohsin al-Mulk did not stop his endeavors for the protection of Urdu. After the resignation of MacDonald, Nawab Mohsin al-Mulk set up Anjuman-e-Taraqi Urdu in Aligarh, which rendered invaluable services for the cause of Urdu. It produced several books on Urdu literature under the supervision of Maulvi Abdul Haq, the Baba-e-Urdu. The scrapping of Urdu as an official language had significant and far-reaching impact on the political scene of the subcontinent. The blatant act of the government to eliminate Urdu did a severe blow to the Muslim culture, for it proudly contained the religious and cultural heritage of the Muslims of India. The elimination of Urdu, in fact, would have meant the total extermination of the Muslims as a nation. The Hindu opposition to Urdu created a new political awareness among the Muslims, who had come to realize the prejudicial Hindu approach toward Muslims and their culture. The Muslims now realized that both Hindus and British were not sincere toward them, and to expect any justice and fair play from the Hindus and the British meant living in false paradise. The anti-Urdu stance by the Hindus strengthened Muslim belief in the two-nation concept, which later on came to be the crowning factor in the Muslim struggle for a separate homeland. Partition of Bengal. Bengal was the biggest province with a population of 78 million. It had a vast area and was an unwidely administered unit. The whole province was under one lieutenant governor who could not look after the administration requirements of such a vast area alone. It was not possible for the lieutenant governor to go around the province whenever there was a dire need of such tours. Consequently, a major portion of the province remained neglected due to its unwilderness. In view of its size and enormous population, it was felt that the province of Bengal should be divided into two parts in order to facilitate the administrative requirement of the vast area. Lord Curzon became the Viceroy of India in 1899. He was an able and efficient administrator. He undertook an extensive tour of the province of Bengal and felt that the province was too big to be administered effectively. The provincial governors had already complained about the administrative difficulties faced by them in the large province. They had recommended the portion of the province in view of its size and big population. A number of partition proposals were viewed and discussed, which however could not materialize. Lord Curzon decided to divide the province into two provinces. He prepared a comprehensive plan of the partition of Bengal in 1905 and sent it to England for approval. The British Crown gave approval to the partition plan, and the province of Bengal was divided into two parts on 16 October 1905, named as Western Bengal and Eastern Bengal. The new province of Eastern Bengal consists of Dhaka as capital, Mama Singh, Chittagong, Assam, Rajshahi, Khulna, Rangpur and Bogra as the constituencies districts. The Muslim reaction to the partition. The new province of Eastern Bengal brought happier prospects for political and economic life for the Muslims. The Muslims overnight turned into majority by the creation of the new province. Muslims were 18 million out of the total population of 31 million in the new province. The partition of Bengal provided chances of great progress to the Muslims who formed the majority group in the new setup. In the combined province of Bengal, the Muslims were a suppressed and dominated class of the society. The Hindus had monopolized trade and government services, which aggravated the economic condition of the Muslims. The partition of Bengal provided them with a chance to rehabilitate their social position. They heard that their social status would get a tremendous boost in the new province. The Muslims therefore expressed their utmost happiness over the partition of Bengal. They offered their gratification in a loyal way to the government for taking a step for their social, economic and political uplift. Hindu reaction toward partition. The Hindu reacted toward the partition of Bengal in a hostile and violent manner. The Hindus could never support a move which was to bring prosperity and happiness to the Muslims. The reasons for Hindu opposition to the partition were as follows. The Hindus believed that they would come under the domination of the Muslims majority in the new province and their superior position would be downgraded to inferior status. As the provincial high court and other judicial bodies were to be shifted to Dhaka, the Hindu lawyers feared that their legal practice would be affected. See, Dhaka was to become the center of journalistic and other academic activities. The Hindu press and media believed that from now onward the Muslim point of view would be projected in the newspapers and magazines. They also feared that their income would seriously be lessened. The Hindu landlords, capitalists and traders did not like the partition as it was to put an end to their exploitation of the poor Muslims. Before the partition of Bengal, the Hindus enjoyed dominant position in the political sphere of the province over the Muslims. The new setup was to put an end to their superior political position, and their political dominance over the Muslims will end. The Hindus therefore launched an intensive movement against the partition of Bengal. They termed the partition as degrading and insult to the national character of the Hindu population. Religious color was given to the agitation, and the partition was termed as the dissection of the sacred co-mother in order to arouse deep opposition by the Hindu masses. They considered the partition as an attempt to sow the seeds of hatred and discontentment among the Indian people to weaken the national movement for independence. The day of 16 October 1905, when partition was enforced, was declared as a national tragedy. Strikes were held throughout the country. The Indian National Congress also jumped in to support the agitation against the partition. The Hindu students put up violent demonstration against the partition. The Congress severely criticized the partition in its annual session of 1906. The Hindu agitation soon turned into a violent reaction. The people disobeyed government orders by refusing to pay taxes and rentals. Communal clashes erupted at a number of places, which aggravated the law and order situation in the country. Bombs were thrown and attacks were made on the lives of the British people. Swadeshi movement was organized, by which the foreign goods were boycotted. The train carrying the governor of the Eastern Bengal were derailed, and an attempt was made on Viceroy's life, which failed. The Muslims kept away from the Hindu agitation and adopted a humble and loyal posture. They welcomed the partition and passed resolutions supporting the partition of Bengal. They impressed upon the government to maintain its decision of the partition of Bengal. However, Gauri's Hindu agitation rocked the government, which could not withstand the extreme pressure of the movement. A Hindu threatened the government to boycott the forthcoming tour of India of the King George. The threat proved successful, and the British government succumbed to the Hindus' agitation. The partition of Bengal was ultimately annulled on 12th December 1911 at a royal meeting known as Delhi Darbar, where the King George announced the decision of annulment to the extreme dismay of the Muslims of Bengal. The Hindus' agitation against the partition reinforced the feelings of the Muslims about Hindu designs. They realized that the Hindus would never allow the Muslims as prosperous and happy life. The Hindu agitation against the partition furthered the two-nation theory. This agitation also convinced the Muslim leaders of the need for a separate Muslim political organization which could safeguard the interests of the Muslims of India and which could counter the Hindu and Congress propaganda.